I was thinking recently about like what is the best story I've ever heard or the best movie I've ever watched or the best show or whatever. And there's this old movie. If I think of like my favorite all-time like story, just the way it was written, the way it was shown, most captivating. Star Wars is up there for some people. Lord of the Rings has to be up there. But there's probably a movie you guys have never heard of. It's an older movie, and it's called Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur, you heard of it?
Oh, I totally heard of that.
Nice, good.
Oh yeah, no.
The main character in Ben-Hur is a guy named Judah Ben-Hur. Judah Ben-Hur. And so it's an awesome name. But the movie takes place in ancient, like, Rome, kind of near Israel. It's a story of a guy who lived at the same time as Jesus. And what I always loved about the story was that it's a story of redemption. The guy, like, something bad happens. It wasn't really his fault, but he gets accused of all this stuff, gets betrayed by a friend. One of those types of stories where he, like, goes to a deep, dark place and then is brought back from it. Story takes place, and he ends up getting accused and, like, betrayed by a friend and sent to this horrible, horrible prison where, like, at one point, they're just literally walking a train of them through the desert, and people are falling off left and right, and they just leave them there, and they're like going, and stops at this little oasis area where the guards bend down to start getting drinks for themselves, and he reaches out to get a drink, and the guy like slaps his hand away, and he's like, well, this is awesome, like I'm gonna die here. And then all of a sudden, when it's just like a really lonely, dark part, you can see like all his hope is lost. This character enters who like lifts up the back of, like just lifts up his head and like gives him a water, like a jar of water. And the guard looks at the guy and he's like, hey, don't give anything to him. And the guy just like looks at the guard and does it anyway. And you can see the guard kind of like get afraid of him and just kind of walk back. And as the story prolongs, you find out that this little character that just made a little intro and outro of the scene was Jesus. And so like Jesus came across his path. And from that point in the movie, his life started to go up. And it was just super interesting how they worked that in. But what it made me think, and what it commonly makes me think about is like, I oftentimes think of Jesus just as a story character or just someone I read about, just someone to learn things about, someone to know that like, oh, Jesus was super loving. He was the one who died for my sins. He rose back to life. Like I know a bunch of facts about Jesus, but I don't oftentimes just sit with the idea of like, what is the real Jesus like? What was it like to know him? Was it really that big of a deal that this man, just him giving you a glass of water, and a Roman guard just could feel this presence about the guy? Like to be in the presence of the real Jesus, what would that be like? What would it be like to know him, to follow him, to walk with him? What kind of characteristics did he have? Like these types of things, I don't think we think about it a lot, but this is our faith. This is the person. We're all Christians. If you believe in Jesus, if you believe that you're a Christian, what you're claiming is to be a follower of Christ. Like if you're a follower of Christ, I think it's important sometimes to take a step back and be like, who is this person I'm claiming to follow? What was he like? What would it have been like to be with him and around him while he was doing all of these things that the Bible claims he did? And so today we're going to kind of do that. Today's going to be more of a story. We're going to just look at two stories and talk about it. And my goal for you this morning, as you're here and as you're partaking in what's going on, we're going to imagine ourselves just as people who are a part of the crowd. Just people who are there, people who are around Jesus, who are watching him do what he's doing. Try to think about, if I really was this person, if I didn't know anything about Jesus except the fact that I'm here and he's a teacher that some people are talking about. Some people claim, oh, I think he's doing miracles. But like, think about the fact, like, what if I didn't know the end of the story? What if I didn't know what he was going to do? What would I think? What would I feel about the way he was acting? It's an interesting thought experiment, but that's what I want us to enter into this morning. So we're going to read two stories, and they're two moments I think would have really thrown people off. Two moments where Jesus acts unexpectedly, and he acts really out of character with what the other religious leaders of his day would have done. And the first one comes to us, we're going to read a story that happens in John 8. It's told in John 8, 1 through 11. And it's an encounter Jesus has with a group of people. But first, let's just start as it goes here. It says, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, which is a place where he commonly went and taught and prayed. But early the next morning, he was back again at the temple, the Jewish temple, the center of worship, the center of where people would go and teach. It was like their giant church. And for them, that's where God was. That's where God's presence was. But that's where the teachers would be, and it's where they would go to teach the people. Just much right here, like Jesus is sitting and teaching this crowd. A crowd soon gathered and sat down, and he taught them. And so Jesus is teaching. Jesus is teaching in the temple, and let's imagine ourselves as this crowd. We're sitting around Jesus. We're watching this guy. Who is this guy? How is he so, where is he getting this wisdom? He didn't study anywhere. He didn't go and train like all these other people, yet his wisdom is so much deeper. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. A woman who is caught in the worst thing she could have been doing. She's cheating on her husband, and this was a serious thing, especially to the religious crowd, the people who were followers of the Jewish faith. This was a huge thing. Marriage was central to their community, to everything they did, and to be breaking your vow, well, you'll see how serious it was. They put her in front of the crowd and said, "Teacher," to Jesus. This woman was caught in the act of adultery. This woman was caught red-handed. There's no question. This isn't like a theory, maybe she was. This is like, we caught her doing this. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? And so right here, this is probably almost like one of those scenes where you feel the energy of the crowd shifting. It's a thing called like mob mentality, where some people are getting fired up about this, and so that same attitude is probably carrying out throughout the whole crowd. So they're fired up. They're like, Jesus, this person is a sinner. They're horrible. They're terrible. The law says that we should stone them. What do you say we should do, though, Jesus? Because you're always so wise and so merciful and so loving. But are you so merciful, so loving, so wise that you will ignore what Moses said we should do? And as the storyteller tells us, he says right here, they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. So this is Jesus' response. These people are coming after him. They're demanding an answer. They're trying to trap him. They want him to either say, no, that law is too severe. That's too crazy. We shouldn't do that. They want him to say that because then they can say he's not a right teacher. He's not a good teacher. He teaches things the law says, but like he twists what it says. Like they want him to ignore the law, or they want him to say, yes, this is what the law says. And then they're going to say, look how evil he is. Look how self-righteous he is. He wants to kill this woman. Because the laws they're taking were from a while back. They weren't the current practices. If he would have said, go ahead and stone her, it would have even been against the laws of the day. Just think about it in our context. If our religion said we could kill someone, that doesn't mean the law of America says we could kill someone. Our religion doesn't say we can kill someone. I was just making an example. But so it would have been against the law for them to do that anyway. In this specific instance. So it's basically they presented Jesus with a lose-lose situation. And so imagine watching this play out. Imagine watching this crowd come to Jesus, and they're angry. They're putting him on the spot. And instead of responding right away or attacking back or anything else, Jesus first just calmly pauses, bends over, and starts to write something in the sand. And the author doesn't tell us what he wrote, and a lot of people have made guesses as to like what Jesus wrote. But bottom line, we don't know. But it's just interesting. It's super interesting that he chose to pause and do this. All right, so let me find where we are. They're trying to trap him. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but they kept demanding an answer. So they keep asking, and he's like, okay, fine. He stands up, stops writing, and he says, let you who is without sin throw the first stone. A very interesting answer. So Jesus doesn't say that you're wrong for convicting her of sin. He doesn't say the law is wrong. Instead, he tells them, let the one who hasn't sinned throw the first stone. And then he stooped down and continued writing in the dust. So Jesus has turned this trap right back on themselves. They are so eager to point out the sin and the flaw in another's life and to make them, to hold them accountable, to punish them. Look what they've done, Jesus. Shouldn't we punish them? Shouldn't we do something? And Jesus says, yeah, we probably should. Why doesn't the one of you who is without sin, why don't you throw the first stone? Jesus flips the table on him. He turns the focus first on me. And I think this is something that would have stood out amazingly from Jesus, is that he would have helped us see others through a different lens. He would have helped us see that the things I so often point out in you, that I try to knock you down with, that I say, they're so annoying when they do this or that. They're so mean when they say this or that. They're so judgmental. All these little things. If we first look at ourselves, we would probably see that we do so much of the things that we accuse others of. And even if it's not the same things, it's different things. We all have areas where we fall short. We all have areas where we're not perfect. And what's crazy is that we so often hold others accountable for their failings while at the same time wanting forgiveness for our own failings. We want other people to be held accountable, but we want our own things to be ignored. We want to highlight the things that make other people worse while we hide the things that make us worse. It's a really interesting habit we have, and Jesus is illuminating it. And so they were trying to trap him into something they could use against him. And let me find right where I was here. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one. So when they heard, let you who is without sin throw the first stone, one by one they started to leave. But it's funny how it says it. It began with the oldest of them. The older people were the first to walk away. Probably because they had a longer list of sins they could think about, And so they started to all walk away until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? Didn't even one of them stay to see it through? Didn't even one of them? None of them were perfect either? He's like, what? No one else is perfect? Obviously being rhetorical. No, Lord, she said. And this is where the story hits its most important part. And this is where it would be super cool to be standing there watching, to watch this angry mob come in and you're like, whoa. And then to watch Jesus stand up to them and leave one by one until it's just Jesus and the sinner left, the person whose sin was found out, whose sin is on display. Jesus, God, you don't fully know he's God, but this is God, the one perfect person in existence is left standing there with the woman. And by Jesus' own statement, let you who is without sin throw the first stone. Jesus is the one standing there without sin. Jesus is the one who had the power to actually condemn her, who had the power to say, I'm going to hold you accountable for your sins, and this is what you deserve. And yet Jesus stands there and he says, neither do I. Go and sin no more. In the face of sin, Jesus shows compassion, and it's crazy. And it's such an amazing glimpse into the heart of God. This is how God views us. God's main concern when he faces our sin is not punishing us for that sin. It's forgiving us. It's wanting to turn us away from the thing that destroys us. When Jesus faces a sinner, he sees the sinner and he loves them and he wants to get them out of their sin because sin is the thing that's killing them. And so he looks at them and he says, neither do I condemn you. It's such an amazing thing. I don't hold this against you. I don't want this for you. I don't see you as only your sin. I see you and I want you away from that. Go and sin no more. And there's one reason Jesus can do this too, because if Jesus really is God, if he really is the perfect judge, the perfect, I guess judge is the word I'm looking at. If he's just, if he's good, he can't ignore her sin. Jesus can't ignore her sin. Sin is really a crime against God. It's choosing to say to God that I don't want you. I would rather go my own way than live with you, is what sin is. And at the very beginning, when Adam and Eve were created, that's what the standard was. It was, if you choose sin, if you choose to go your own way, the consequence, the penalty is death and separation from God. And God, if he's good, if he's just, he can't just ignore when sin happens, or else that would just be, it would just be a lie. He would have just been lying when he said the punishment for sin is death. So the sin that each and every one of us commit, the sin that woman committed, had to be paid for. It had to be addressed. It can't just be ignored and forgiven. He can't say, I forgive you, we'll act like it never happened. He can say, I forgive you because I have made the replacement. I have become your replacement. I have taken the sin that was separating you from God. I'm taking that. I'm taking the punishment. I'm taking the separation. I'm laying down my perfect life that does not deserve to be given away. But I will take your punishment and I will give my perfect life so that you can have life once again. And so that's why Jesus is able to say to her, I don't condemn you. It's because he is the one who is taking her punishment. Sin is serious. Sin is a big deal. But Jesus can look into sin and say, I forgive you and I still love you because I have taken the penalty your sin deserves. And that's a pretty crazy thing. To continue, we have a story. I told you we were going to do 2 stories today.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, quick question.
Okay, so if Adam and Eve did not sin against God, would there be no such thing as sin?
That's a great question. If Adam and Eve never sinned, would there be sin?
Somebody else probably would sin.
That's what I would say. I'd say probably somewhere along the line, someone would have fallen short. So it doesn't bode well that the first human ever fell into sin. It probably means that someone along the line would have fallen into the same thing. That's a great question. But let's continue on here. So story number 2. This is an interesting one too. So imagine ourselves in a group of people who's been walking behind Jesus. Jesus had a ton of followers. He had 12 disciples, 12 people he invested in and walked with and kind of gave the behind the scenes look to, the 12 disciples, but he had a lot of followers. He had crowds of people who would follow him and learn from him. And so let's imagine ourselves as one of those followers. We're walking along. We're like, this Jesus guy's so cool. He's doing some awesome stuff. Can you believe what he said to that woman? That was crazy. And then we're like, yeah, that is kind of crazy. He talked to that woman and said he didn't condemn her. Like, how can he forgive sins? That's interesting that he can forgive sins, because I thought only God could forgive sins. And so that's discussion that's happening amongst us. And then we go into this new place. We find out that Jesus has been invited to dinner by a Pharisee. And so this is a story that comes from the book of Luke. And this guy named Simon invites Jesus into his house. And in the Roman world, it was very common to invite popular teacher or wisdom people and have them recline at the table with you. They had like a table on the floor, and you would like lay and eat. I don't know how accurate that is, but there was like a long table. They would be like kind of like laying on pillows and like talking. And people like us, the crowd, we would be standing along the back of the room listening to the discussion, because it was like yeah. So you'd let people in your house. You'd probably have a whole room dedicated to this type of thing. It was like your form of entertainment. Like, let's go listen to Jesus talk with Simon, like two of the great minds of our day, whatever. But Simon was a Pharisee. Simon was a religious elite. He knew the law. He knew everything. He wants to test Jesus. He wants, probably out of a good place, he wants to know who this Jesus guy is. And we begin to see that he has kind of a perspective of Jesus that might differ from others. And so the story goes, one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his house and sat to eat. When a certain immoral woman from the city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. So something about the religious leaders is they made it very clear that they do not associate with sinners. Sinners and religious elites had to have a distinct separation, because the religious leaders were clean, and sinners, people of the wrong style of life, they were unclean. And the religious leaders wanted a clear separation from them so that they were not even spoiled by bad company, bless you. And so this was an important thing for these leaders, is that they had a clear separation. They were not friends of sinners. They were not involved with sinners. And yet time and time again we see that Jesus could have cared less about it. Jesus actually preferred the company of sinners. And so here's an example where Jesus is kind of being rebellious in a way. He's allowing this person to enter with him into this place. And he's not just letting her be there. Listen to what's going on in this scene. She knelt behind him at his feet. So now this woman's crying. Interesting, okay. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Feet were very dirty back then. They wore sandals, and it was like dirt roads and everything. So he's got these dirty feet, and she's cleaning his feet with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. Okay, so she's essentially cleaned his feet, and now she's approved of him, and she has put perfume on his feet, which is like anointing with oil. You might have heard that term before, but that's signifying something, that this person is set apart, this person is special, this person is different. And so it's also extremely expensive. Perfume back then, that was crazy expensive, and she is not a rich person. So this was a huge thing that she's doing here. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. So Simon in his heart, Simon looks at Jesus and says, aha, he is not the prophet everyone says he is. There's no way he could be, because if he was a prophet, he'd know that this is a sinner that's washing his feet off, a sinner that he's allowed into my house, a sinner that is doing this, disrupting whatever's going on here. He's let it happen. So there's no way he could be a prophet. If he's letting this go on, something's wrong with this guy. And it's so funny that that's what Simon chose to think. He was just thinking this to himself. And Jesus goes right ahead to prove that he is a prophet, because Jesus answered his thoughts. Jesus answered his thoughts. So Jesus is like, yeah, okay, I hear you, Simon. I hear that thought. He said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Simon says, go ahead, teacher. Notice again, he says teacher. He doesn't say Lord. He doesn't say my God. So Jesus is just a very smart teacher to this guy. He doesn't even say prophet. He says teacher. And Simon replied, so go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. Jesus told him this story. A man loaned 2 people money, 500 pieces of silver to one, and 50 pieces of silver to the other. But neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose would love him more? Okay, this person was forgiven 500, this person 50. Simple math says, who would love him more? The person who's forgiven 50 or 500? 50. No, 500 probably, because it's more, right? Well, let's see what Simon said. Simon answered, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger amount? And that's right, said Jesus. And I'm sure, so the way Simon answered is like, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt, like, you know when you know someone's trying to trick you with the question, but you don't know how they're trying to trick you? So he's like, I'm pretty sure this is the right answer. And so now Jesus has kind of laid his trap. So Jesus says, Jesus turns to the woman, and he says to Simon, look at this woman right here. Look at her, Simon. Do you see her? Do you see this woman? Because this person you're calling a sinner, there's something really interesting about that fact, that you, the religious leader, are calling this woman a sinner, because when I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet. You didn't even offer me a bowl of water to clean my feet, Simon. That's common courtesy. You didn't care enough to do that for me. But she washed my feet with her tears and wiped it with her hair. That's how much she cared about me. You didn't greet me with a kiss on the cheek, like a ceremonial thing for them, very common. It's like a privileged guest. I'm welcoming you into my home. But from the time I came in, she hasn't stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, probably a common thing to help with dryness of scalp or something like that. But she anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. I forgave her. There must have been an encounter right before this where Jesus, very similar to that other woman, had an opportunity to forgive this woman, to tell her, I see you, I love you, and I don't see you as a sinner. I see you as my loved child who is trapped in sin, and I want you out of that. And so he has forgiven her. And he says, because I have forgiven her so much, she has shown me much love. A person who is forgiven little shows only little love. So those who love much have been forgiven much is this thing Jesus introduces. He tells Simon, the reason you don't love people, the reason you aren't like this woman pouring her heart out in love, it's honestly because you think that you don't have much to be forgiven of. You think you are so perfect and righteous and good that you're above everyone else. You think that you have to look down on others. But in reality, Simon, you have just as much sin built up in there. It might look different. It might look like pride and self-righteousness and arrogance and really looking down on others. It might look like that, but that's still sin. That's still horrible stuff. And if you haven't given that over to God and said, God, I'm sorry of this, would you forgive me? If there's no forgiveness there, the result is a lack of love. Where this woman, her sin's on display. Everyone knows about it, and yet Jesus forgives her. So she's been forgiven much, so she loves much. He has been forgiven little because he hasn't given it over. And so the takeaway here for me, guys, if I had seen this, if I had witnessed, if I had heard this encounter, the question really, it's the final question here. Do you love much? Is that one there? Yeah. This question should kind of be on each of our hearts after hearing that, because the question is, do I understand how much God has forgiven me? Do I understand my own sin to a depth where I know I've done wrong things. I know I've done bad things. I know that the things I've done are worthy of separation from God. And like, these things are bad. This is a horrible, horrible darkness. And yet, Jesus has taken it and forgiven me of it. Just like that woman whose sin is on display, and he says, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. That's how Jesus sees us. He says, I love you, and I don't hold you accountable for your sin if you believe in me. And when you understand that forgiveness, it changes your heart towards everyone. Not just does it make you fall in love with your Savior, Jesus, the one who laid his life down, it makes you love others because you see them as you see yourself, as someone who needed saving, as someone who is broken and who is hurting, and someone you want to help direct towards love. I wrote this little thing, and it's how we'll end, but I think this is kind of all of these thoughts communicated. When you understand this type of forgiveness, it should change the way you see people around you. The response to forgiveness is love. You stop judging people, you stop hurting people, you stop asserting yourself and demanding your own way. You stop excluding people, you stop spreading lies, you stop tearing down others, because all of that is sin and it's all destructive, and it's all the things that Jesus died on that cross for. It's all the things he laid his life down for. And it's what he freed us from. And why would we go back into this thing that we've been forgiven and freed from? And so we have an invitation to go a new way. And it's just amazing. And so I think when you encounter the real Jesus, it changes your life. It changes everything. And that's what happened in these encounters in the story. And I think the beautiful thing is that stories like this, we have a picture of the real Jesus, and it's the four Gospels, those stories that tell us who this guy was, who this God, fully man person. There's no one else like him, and he's worth following with our lives. So I'm going to pray for us, and you guys are good to go out of here, but pretty cool stuff. God, we thank you for who you are. Jesus, we thank you just for being so unpredictable, for being a God and a person who loves us despite what we deserve, God. We deserve punishment. We deserve to be separated because that's what we've chosen for ourselves. We choose to go our own way. We choose to say we don't want you, but God, you continually choose to say you want us. And God, I just hope that this morning you would help us to lay down the things that are separating us, to lay down the things that keep us from going deeper with you. God, there's nothing in this life that can separate us from you. And once we're yours, God, we're yours forever. So we thank you for that. And so I just pray that everyone in here, God, would understand that there's nothing they could do to work themselves out of your grasp. As long as they believe in you, Jesus, that they're safe forever, that they're in your presence now, and they will be for the rest of eternity. And so, God, I thank you for that truth. I thank you for this time. In your name, amen. Oh! You okay, Taylor?